Welcome to today's webinar, Deep Dive into the latest dashboard platform features. My name is Aaron Melamed, and I am a Product Solutions Engineer here at Syncfusion. So today we're going to be talking about the Syncfusion Dashboard Platform. And being a platform, it is comprised of multiple components, so we'll be looking at several of those today. We're going to start by looking at the Dashboard Designer. We'll then move on to the Dashboard Server. And then we'll also briefly talk about the Dashboard Platform SDK and the Dashboard mobile app. All right, so to begin, let's go ahead and talk about the Dashboard Designer. So this is a Dashboard Designer, and this is a drag and drop interface. It's comprised of multiple different areas. So on the left side, you have your list of widgets. These are going to be the pieces that you're going to be able to use to create a dashboard. So you'll have things like charts, grids, gauges, filters, and so on, available on the left side rather. These can simply be grabbed and dragged onto the canvas in order to start creating a dashboard. On the right side, you'll have your informational boxes. These will allow you to create or to rather manage some of the features of the dashboards themselves. So the very first one in the top right allows you to add additional tabs to your dashboard. With the current version of the dashboard platform, you have two different ways of creating larger or giving yourself more space to create larger dashboards. You can either give yourself additional tabs on your dashboard in order to incorporate additional widgets that you may not have room for with the default canvas space. And so you can do that using this box by clicking the plus sign, or if you look at the bottom of the canvas here, you can also see that we have the ability to add additional widgets to an existing dashboard by simply dragging a new widget to the bottom of the screen, and that will allow you to create a scrolling dashboard. So I'm going to quickly pop over to my browser here to show you an example of a scrolling dashboard. So here's an example of a scrolling dashboard. We've extended the number of widgets beyond just a single screen. So this is one of the newer features of the dashboard platform. So we can now create scrolling dashboards in addition to multiple tabs. So this one has both multiple tabs as well as the scrolling dashboard feature. All right, so moving on, we also have on the right side of the designer the data sources box. This allows you to connect to your various data sources, and you can have as many data sources as you need, and you can also mix and match the source type within a single dashboard. So you can have, for example, connections to files and databases in the same dashboard. There are two ways to get a data source into a dashboard. You can either create a new data source connection, or you can import an existing one. So the Create New Data Source Connection button is going to be, again, the blue plus sign, and then importing is going to be the icon right next to it. So if we click on this Add New Data Source button, you'll be presented with the Data Source Connection wizard. This allows you to create a new data source connection. So the first thing you need to do is give it a name, and then from there you'll want to select your connection type. We support a lot of different connection types. You can see here we support files such as Microsoft Excel, CSV, JSON, and text documents, as well as a wide variety of database sources, including SQL Server Analysis Services, Postgres, SQLite, Oracle, MySQL, and so on. We also support things like Azure Table Storage and Salesforce in the cloud, and we also have a web data source option for any APIs that you might want to connect to. One of the newer features of this version of the platform is also that we support JSON strings that have hierarchies in them. So this is also a newer feature of the dashboard platform. So as I mentioned, this is how you create a new data source connection, but we also can import existing ones, and there's two ways to do that as well. So we can either import a local file, or rather just a file-based data source. So if we've previously created a dashboard and previously set up data sources, we can save those as a file and then import them through this interface here. Or we can import them from the dashboard server. So before we get into the dashboard server, one thing to note is that it does allow you to publish both dashboards, data sources to it, as well as widgets. And that allows you to then grab those data sources in the designer in order to use them for a new dashboard. So you can see here through this server tab, we have access to all the different dashboard data sources that my particular user has permissions to see. And so you'll notice in the top right of the dashboard designer that I am currently logged in as dashboard server guest. So this particular user has access to these set of data sources. And from here I can choose any and all of them in order to add them to my dashboard. Beneath that data sources box on the right side, we also have a widgets box, and this simply allows you to see what widgets are being utilized in your dashboard and quickly manage them. So if you want to remove some of those widgets or just directly edit them, you can choose them from the this widgets box here. And then the final box on the bottom right is linked dashboards, and this will show you if this dashboard is currently utilizing any links. I'll talk a bit more about dashboard linking when we get into the widgets themselves, but just so you know, if you are using any links, they'll show up in this last box. So typically after creating a dashboard, the first thing you'll do is establish a data source connection. So after you make a connection to your data source, whether you're uploading an Excel file or connecting to a SQL server, the next step from there will be to pull a data set out of it. And so in order to do that, once you've connected to a data source, all you need to do is either double click on that data source here on the right side or simply single click and then select the edit icon over here on the bottom of the box. And this will bring you into the data source designer. And again, this is a drag and drop interface. So from here, you have the ability to do a lot of different things. So you'll notice there's a data preview at the bottom that you can drag up to see more items. We, by default, load the first 100 rows from your data source, and if you want, you can load more. You have the ability to filter your data preview here as well. These filters will be different depending on your different column types. One thing to note is that if you do apply filtering here, this only applies to the data preview. It has no effect anywhere else in the data source. You'll notice that we also have access to all the different things in this database that we've connected to. So we have access to our tables, our views. If we had any stored procedures, they would also show up here as well. So in this case, we've pulled out a single table, and you can see all the fields within that table. And we can do some basic ETL inside of this. So some basic data transformations can be done. So we can do things like changing column types. We can duplicate or rename columns. You can also apply different expressions or functions depending on the data type. So data expressions, if you're dealing with date data, or fiscal year starts can be changed out as well. This is also one of the newer features of the platform, so the ability to change the start of the fiscal year. And then from there, we can also apply either aggregation or arithmetic functions if we're dealing with numerical data. We also have the ability to merge tables. So if we need to join two tables together, it's pretty simple. Simply grab another table from the list on the left, drag it into the canvas, and that will bring up the join editor. From here, we can do inner joins or left outer joins, and it's a pretty simple process to get these two tables merged in. We also have the ability to include additional columns through expressions. So we have an expression editor built into this data source designer, and that allows you to add additional functions to your data columns. So from here we can do things like apply numerical, aggregation, conditional, logical, date, string, filter, or row functions in order to create additional data columns. So for example, with conditional functions, we can create complex if statements. We also have the ability to apply filters directly to the data source as well. So there is another filter icon in this toolbar. So if you actually want to apply a filter to the data source and not to the data preview, you would use the Add Filters link at the top. And this just simply gives you a nice interface for creating those filters. And again, the filter types will depend on your column data or your column types. We also have the ability to swap over into a query view. So if you'd rather import your own queries or write your own queries and not use this drag and drop interface, you absolutely have the choice to do that. So up here at the top left, there's a drop-down menu that lets you swap between design and query views. And if we go over to that, you'll see that if you are using the drag and drop interface, we are generating these queries as changes are being made in the design interface. So if you'd like, you can at any time switch over to this interface and then work in this view. One thing to note, though, is if you do make changes in the queries after using the design view, you have to stay in this view, otherwise you'll lose any changes you make if you go back to design view. So from here, once you're done setting up your data set, you're then able to finish creating a dashboard. So at this point, if you have already chosen your widgets and placed them on the dashboard in the positions that you'd like, you can then start to configure them. So for example, I'm going to choose this donut chart in the bottom left and go to its widget settings, which can be accessed through the gear icon in the top right corner of that selected widget. So by clicking that, I'll be taken to the properties page for that widget. And in this particular example, this has actually already been set up, so there's not really a whole lot for me to do. but I do want to show you that in the properties page here, this is where you go to change the various cosmetic properties of the widget. So things like enabling or disabling the animations, the ability to show the legend or not, changing your font colors, your color palette for the widget. So for example, with the donut or pie chart, you can change your series palette so you can have different colors for the different segments. And this is also where you go to do things like enable linking. So for any widget that supports linking, which is the vast majority of them, on this properties page, we'll have this checkbox for enable linking. And so enable linking allows you to do quite a number of different things. You can see here that there are 3 different types of objects that we can link to: dashboard, URL, or internal. So the first option, dashboard, means that you can link one dashboard to another. And because the linking is activated at the widget level, that means that individual data points in the widget can link to one of these 3 objects. So for example, if you want to have a different type of drill down, so let's say we want to do drill down in this donut chart and we want to see the data behind one of these segments, it might make more sense to display that data as a grid as opposed to another donut chart. And so that's where dashboard linking comes into play. So we can set up linking to another dashboard that contains the data that this donut chart is mapped to, but in a grid. And so whenever we click on one of the segments in this donut chart, it will take us to that other dashboard and just show us only the data that makes up that segment, but displayed in a grid. And so this works for any widget and any dashboard. So you can do quite a bit of linking. And there's also no limit to how deep the chains go. So even in that linked dashboard, we can still go further, and then each of those items in that grid can be linked to something else. And so if you are using tabs in your dashboards, you can see here that if you do select it to link to another dashboard, we can link to a specific tab within that dashboard. We also have the ability to link to any external URL, so it is not limited to other Syncfusion dashboards. And so what this means is that you can grab any external URL and pass parameters through it. The way dashboard linking works is that we actually send a parameter based on the data point that was selected to that second dashboard or to that external link in order to do some filtering. And so because this works on the external URL, you can see here that all you need to do is just double click on your column name, and that will append the parameter to that URL. So this allows you to do quite a bit of, it gives you quite a bit of control over exactly how your dashboards behave if your users are interacting with them. And then this internal option allows you to also link to another tab of the same dashboard using the same methods. In addition to dashboard linking, we do also support standard drill down. So drill down in the same widget where you click on the segment, for example, and then the widget will reload and show you a new layer of data. So in order to set that up and also to map your widgets to the data that you've pulled out, you simply click on the Assign Data button here at the top. So this will bring you to the Data tab, which is now over here on the right side. And you can see all the fields that we've pulled out from the table that was related to our data source. And then from here, we have the ability to map our measures and our dimensions. So measures are going to be our numerical data, and dimensions is going to be essentially everything else. And so for example, in a donut chart, if I wanted to add another layer of data, if I wanted to enable drill down, I would simply go from, let's say, we're going to add a new column here. So going from service type, we can then see subscriber name as the layer beneath. So if I drop that in, it will ask me if I want to enable multi-level drill. So I'll go ahead and say yes. The sample or the preview will update. And then now I'll see this crosshatch pattern over the segments when I hover over them. So this is what lets you know that drill down is enabled for a particular widget. And so whenever you click on one of those segments, you'll be able to see the donut chart will refresh, and then we get to see new data inside of it. So coming back to the main dashboard page here, we have the ability to include filters in each of these dashboards. So filtering happens in a sort of hierarchy. So filtering can be applied at the data source level, which I showed earlier. It can also be applied, and actually let me go back to this donut chart here. Filtering can also be applied here at the widget level. So once you map a field to a widget, you have the ability to set a filter at that stage. So here we can grab any of these fields, go to the settings for that field, and you can see here we have filtering available. If we're dealing with something like date data, we also have the ability to do absolute and relative date filtering. So there's a lot of options, a lot of control there. Both data source and widget level filtering are not accessible by the end user once a dashboard is published. And so that brings us to the third level of filtering, which is user filtering. And so in order to enable your users to be able to filter the dashboard on their own, you can simply utilize one of the filters as a widget. So towards the bottom here, we have a filters category on our widgets, and we have all the standard filter types you'd expect to see. So we have combo boxes, range navigator, date pickers, checkboxes, radio buttons, list boxes, and a range slider. But in addition to these standard filters, most widgets can also act as a filter on their own. So you can grab, for example, this map here, and by making sure that this box here, act as master widget, is checked, this widget can then act on every other widget on the dashboard, meaning if I were to select one of the states that's represented in this map, I can filter out the dashboard to data based on that location. And so if you have multiple filters available on a dashboard, whether they're widgets or whether they're standard filter type widgets, you can also set the listeners for each of those filters. So by default, a filter will act on the entire dashboard. And so every widget will be updated. But if you don't want that behavior to be the case, we can go to this dashboard menu up here, access our filters menu, and this allows us to change what widgets will listen to a filter. And so this allows for quite a bit of customization as well. So here we can choose which of the widgets are going to be able to be updated by this map. But let's say we had multiple dashboard or multiple drop-down menus. We can create a cascading effect by setting one drop-down to be the listener of another drop-down and to have no effect on any other widgets, so that when you get to the end of that drop-down selection hierarchy, that final one will be the one that updates the appropriate widgets on the dashboard. So again, you can have as many widgets as you want on a dashboard, and you can customize the listeners for each and every one of those. Another thing to note from the designer is that we can enable auto refresh from here. By default, these dashboards do not automatically refresh. The only times they update is essentially manually. So when you first load the dashboard, they will at that point reach out to your data sources and pull the latest data. If your user is interacting with any filters on a dashboard, they will also update at that time. Or if a user manually updates it using the Update Dashboard button, we'll also be able to update the data at that point. But beyond that, in the Dashboard Designer, we can also enable automatic refresh. So in the same dashboard menu, underneath filters, we have refresh settings. From here, we can enable auto refresh, and we have a couple of modes here that are available. So we have the ability to set a timer for how often the dashboard is able to update. By default, we're on an hourly mode, and from here we can choose hours, minutes, or seconds. So this can update as often as every second, and you can go up from there. If you choose, for example, daily, you can choose a daily occurrence and choose how often that happens. If you go with weekly, you start to get a bit more granular. You can choose your specific day of the week that your dashboards will update, and so on and so forth. And so here, again, it's very similar to the listeners options that you have on filters. You can choose which widgets will be affected by this auto refresh. Now, we can also go a bit further and toggle this over to widget refresh mode. If we do that, we can then pick and choose which widgets will refresh, very similar to the standard dashboard mode. But now, instead of setting a dashboard-wide refresh setting, each individual widget has its own dedicated refresh timer. And it's the same as we saw before. So we can have certain widgets update every second, another one every hour, another one every day, and so on and so forth. So it's completely up to you how you set those up. Also built into the Dashboard Designer I mentioned briefly is user management. So if I click up here on my current username, you can see that there is user management built into the Dashboard Designer. So we can manage multiple user accounts, and that also means we can juggle multiple instances of the Dashboard server. There's a Server Explorer built into the designer, so if you have multiple server instances across different environments, those can all be accessed through here very easily. So what this allows you to do is if you have maybe multiple environments, such as testing and production, you can easily publish dashboards across both those different instances. This also supports connecting to Azure-based dashboards as well, so you can, like I said, mix and match your different environments. Also possible within the Dashboard Designer is the ability to publish your dashboards directly to the server. So underneath the server tab, you'll find the publish option. From here, you have the ability to publish the dashboard itself, the individual data sources, and also individual widgets as well. All right, so let's go ahead and move on from the Dashboard Designer and take a look at the Dashboard Server in more detail. So we've technically been looking at some aspects of the Dashboard Server by looking at some of these example dashboards, but let's actually take a look at the full Dashboard Server interface. So once a dashboard has been published, this is the typical location where it will end up. In the Dashboard Server, you have an easy way to manage users and their permissions and their ability to view and share dashboards. So one of the first features that gets enabled by publishing a dashboard to the server is collaboration. So built into the Dashboard Server is a commenting system. So here on this dashboard, we can enable commenting by clicking on the right side toolbar and clicking on that speech bubble. You'll notice that the comment bar actually allows you to, or the comment system allows you to use rich text editor. So you can completely format your text. You can include links, you can embed images, and there's also a built-in watcher system, or notification system rather. So by default, if a user creates a new comment or starts a new thread or joins a common thread, they become an auto watcher on that thread, meaning they get email notifications of any new actions that happen on that thread. Each user does have the ability to remove themselves from that watch list, and also as an admin, you have the ability to change that default behavior so that users are not being asked to opt out of being a watcher if they don't want to be. In addition to being able to collaborate at the dashboard level, you also have the ability to export the dashboard, and this actually works with this commenting system as well, since one of your options for exporting the dashboard is an image format, and so that means that you can take this exported image and use it inside of your comment, just to give yourself some visual reference to whatever the conversation is about. But you can see here we support exporting the dashboard to images, image format, PDF, and Excel. Now everything I just mentioned is also available at the widget level. So the commenting and the exporting that I just mentioned was for the dashboard as a whole, but each individual widget that displays data is also able to have its own dedicated comment thread with the same exact features that I just mentioned, and each of those widgets is also able to be exported to image, PDF, and CSV and Excel formats as well. Now let me actually switch dashboards here to show one with a filter. In addition to the collaboration through commenting, we also have the ability to show or to save any filter parameters that have been set by the user. So this particular dashboard does have at least one filter available inside of it, which is a drop-down menu. So if, for example, I have a dashboard with many different filters, many drop-downs, or maybe several different drop-downs, date pickers, and everything else that might be able to be used as a filter, and if I want to have my dashboard set up for me every time I come to look at it, what I can do is set up my dashboard filters the way I need by making selection and then saving it as a view. Each user in the dashboard server has the ability to save custom views, which allows them to save the values of their filters. Those views can be seen here in the right-hand sidebar as well. This particular one doesn't have any saved, but this is where you would see them if you had any saved views. And again, it just makes it a lot easier and more convenient in order to load your specific version of a dashboard. Moving on from those features, we also have some other features that the dashboard server enables once a dashboard has been published here. One of the major features that this enables is scheduling. Scheduling in the dashboard server allows you to automatically send emails containing a dashboard to whoever you'd like. So by default, you can have as many schedules per dashboard as you like, and so that means that your schedules do need to have unique names. So I'll just call this one Test 3, and then if you had multiple tabs in your dashboard, you can also choose which of those tabs this should apply to, whether it be all, so all tabs in the dashboard, or a specific tab within a given dashboard. Once you make those selections, the next screen will ask you to set up your recurring event. So this looks very similar to the timer settings that we just saw inside the auto refresh menu for the dashboard designer. So you have the ability to go to have different modes here. So you have hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. Starting with the hourly, the most frequent or the smallest frequency rather, that you can send an email is every 5 minutes. So from every 5 minutes, you can go up from there. So we can, for example, if we go back to weekly, just like what we saw in the auto refresh settings, we have the ability to choose your specific days of the week. We can also choose to schedule it for a later time. So we can choose to have this schedule start at a later date and a specific time. And then we can also choose how many occurrences will happen before this either expires, or if you want to just run forever. Once you make your selections here in the occurrence editor, we also are then able to set our recipients for the email that gets sent out. These recipients can come from the dashboard server itself, so they can actually be any named user in the dashboard server. They can also be any group inside the dashboard server, so users can be placed into groups in order to make permissioning more simplistic. And then we also have the ability to include any external user through this third box. So you can just add anyone's email address, whether or not they're a named user in the dashboard server, and they too can receive a dashboard email. And then the final step here is to choose the format to include that dashboard as. So we can choose an image, PDF, or Excel formats, the same ones that we can manually export the dashboard as. The image format is a PNG file, PDF is obviously a PDF image, and then the Excel option is just the data behind the widgets without any visualizations. And if you wanted to see both, you would just simply create two schedules, one with each of the two formats. Now, in addition to this scheduling feature, we also have the ability to take this a step further. So if we go back to this first page and toggle on data alerts, we now change how this is set up. So instead of creating a standard recurring event, with a data alert, what we can do is create conditions that must be met before that email is sent out. And so here we can, for example, and also data alerts are widget specific. So once you choose your dashboard and a particular tab within that dashboard, you then choose a specific widget to base that condition off of. So in this case, we have a sales dashboard, and we can do something like converted leads. So we can set up a data alert in this case for converted leads. So once we hit a certain value, so let's say the current month converted leads, once we hit a certain target, let's say it's 100, at that point we want to send a data alert to certain people. So this is a relatively simple condition, but you can see here we can add quite a few, we can add additional conditions, we can also add more complex conditions using the same expression editor that is found in the dashboard designer. So this again allows us to include other functions, including the creation of if statements in order to create more complex conditions. So once you set up your condition for this data alert, your next screen will then ask you to customize the body of the email that goes out with that data alert. So essentially you have the ability here to let somebody know why they're receiving this email. You can merge in their username, you can merge in the company name, and you can also merge in the data from the widget that the data alert is based off of. So you can essentially tell this person that you hit your converted lead count, it is this number now, and here's the information about it. Here's the dashboard that shows it. So a very convenient way of letting someone know why they're receiving these data alerts. And so then our final two screens are going to be the same as before. So we have the same recurrence editors as we just saw. The only difference here is that we're setting up a schedule to check for how often, this will set how often we check to see if the condition is true, rather than automatically sending the emails at these predefined times. And then the final screen is exactly the same as before. Select your recipients and choose your format. Another major feature of the dashboard server is versioning support. So through versioning support, we have the ability to keep track of all versions of a dashboard that have been created and edited. So that means if you have multiple users that have the ability to create and edit dashboards, you can keep track of the work that they've done. When you have, through version history, you have the ability to open or download any previous version of a dashboard. And if there were multiple versions of a dashboard, there would be a third option, which would be restore, so that you can restore an older version at any time as well. This also includes a file log history, so you can see an event history for each of these dashboards and see what users have done what to each one of these different files. Through the dashboard server, we also have the ability to do dashboard sharing, and this can be done in a couple of different ways. The first way is simply through generating a link. So through this option, you simply get a link, a direct link to a particular dashboard that can be copied to your clipboard and then shared in any way, whether it be through email, some chat system, or anything else. When a user shares a link, the end user will ultimately see something like this. They will see a full screen dashboard without the dashboard server interface along with it. So they'll just get a direct link to the dashboard itself without the server interface. So they cannot navigate to other dashboards through that link. The other option that you have here for sharing is getting embed code. So through this option, we have the ability to generate embed code that can be used in another web page or another website. And you can also have some additional options here. So you have the ability to turn off the commenting feature that we saw before, to turn off the ability to have saved views, and we can also enable single sign-on, which is also supported by the dashboard server. So here we support Windows and Azure Active Directory for single sign-on. Another thing to note with the sharing through the dashboard server is that it does not by default override any permissions. So if you have set your dashboards to only be visible to certain users, that will still be respected if the dashboard is shared via a link or via embedding. If a user that does not have access attempts to access these dashboards, they'll be presented with a login screen. However, there is a way to override that if you'd like, as it is possible to make dashboards public by removing all permissions, and therefore anyone that has access to these links will be able to see the dashboards. All right, so not shown here because this is our public demo server is the settings page of the dashboard server. So the settings page allows you to easily begin to white label the dashboard server. So you'll notice here that we have several instances of Syncfusion branding on the dashboard server. All of those instances of the Syncfusion logo and name can all be changed and removed very easily through the settings menu. We can also remove the powered by message as well as the copyright information. The settings page also gives you access to the localization support of the dashboard server. So if you have created localization files and translated the UI, you can set those through the settings page, and as an admin you can set the default language of the interface, and then each user will still have their own dedicated language selector menu here on each page where they can override the default language of the server for themselves. All right, so that covers most of the high-level features of the dashboard server. And just to kind of touch on some of the newer features in this version of the platform as well, you'll notice that this particular dashboard has a map widget inside of it. So in previous versions, they all look like this, essentially with unlabeled shapes. So in the current version, we now do have support for labeled shapes, and you can see that in this example, also showing the scrolling dashboard. So we can now include labels for our different shapes in the map widget. One other feature that's new to this version of the platform deals with one of the specific widgets called the card widget. So in this current version, we also have the ability to change the background color of these card widgets, which are these colored boxes here, the green and the red ones, based on some conditions. So in this case, you can see that certain values return a green background color and others return a red background color. And so conditional styling is now available on this card widget. So let's go ahead and move on from the dashboard server and talk a little bit about the dashboard platform SDK. In order to do that, I'm going to move over to our documentation for the dashboard platform. So this is our help section. I'm going to click on dashboard platform, and then over here you can see dashboard platform SDK. So underneath this section, we also can see a getting started section, and then if we expand that, we can see a list of all the different viewer components that we have available for the dashboard platform. So what the dashboard platform SDK allows you to do, specifically all these different viewer components, is it allows you to embed a dashboard directly inside of your own application. So this is separate from dashboard sharing through embedding an iframe code or through the link. This allows you to directly embed into your own application and create your own custom experience. So you can see here we support all current major web platforms. We support all 3 Windows desktop platforms, UWP, Windows Forms, and WPF. And we also have a Xamarin component for cross-platform mobile applications. And so with the SDK, you have a lot of power and customization available here. So there's documentation on how to create your own custom themes for each individual widget. And our example here in the documentation shows you how to create a dark theme. We also have support for localization in the SDK as well. So even if you're not using the dashboard server, you can still translate the UI and apply that through the SDK. The SDK also supports various APIs for, again, giving you more control over the dashboards, their appearances, and also their behaviors. So you have the ability to, for example, pass parameters through an API through the SDK. So This allows you to either silently pass parameters or to prompt the user to input a value for a parameter. Auto refresh can also now be set through the API, through an API here in the dashboard SDK. We can also send or set filter parameter values through an API here in the SDK as well. So any filters that are available in the dashboard server, in the dashboard that the user can interact with, their values, their default values can be set or changed through this API. So again, a lot of different control options with this SDK. And then it also brings us to the fourth component that we're going to talk about with the dashboard platform, which is the dashboard mobile application. So the dashboard platform does include a mobile app that's already available on both the Google Play and the Apple App Store. So you can go ahead and download this today and play around with it. But it allows you to log into your dashboard server. So you just put in the URL to wherever you deployed your dashboard server, and then you can log in as a specific user. Once in, you have the ability to interact with your dashboards in exactly the same way that you just saw, but just naturally on a smaller screen. So the dashboard server as a whole and dashboards themselves are all mobile responsive by default, and you can easily see that through this mobile app. So you still have the ability to do things like searching, filtering, and sorting of dashboards. Within the dashboard itself, you can also do things like share it through a link, and you can even export the dashboard on a mobile platform. So on Android and iOS, you have the ability to export to the image, PDF, Excel, and CSV file formats in the dashboard mobile app. All right, and that pretty much covers the majority of the features that we were going to look at today. So we'll go ahead and start, we'll wrap things up here with a few more slides. Now, I'd like to briefly tell you a bit about Syncfusion. Syncfusion delivers an extensive range of over 800 web, mobile, and desktop controls. We also empower businesses to get the most out of their data with our enterprise solutions, including the dashboard and big data platforms. We've been in business for over 16 years and are headquartered in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina in the U.S. Syncfusion has more than 12,000 customers, including large financial institutions, Fortune 100 companies, and global IT consultancies. More than 1 million users from 125 countries trust Syncfusion in their development process. So let me also mention our community license. For smaller companies with revenue under $1 million US, all Syncfusion products are available for free. That includes all the controls in our Essential Studio as well as our enterprise solutions. We have plenty of customers who have built up their businesses starting with our community license. If you want to stay on top of any Syncfusion news, be sure to follow us on all of our various social channels. So we are on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and of course also on YouTube, which is where you will find all the recordings for all of our webinars, including this one once it goes live. And so with that, I also just want to thank everyone that joined us today and everyone that participated in the Q&A session. We had a lot of great questions, a lot of great feedback as well, so thank you again, and wish everyone a great rest of your day.